Today's reading from the letter to the Hebrews is a powerful passage, and I'd like to look at it closely again. St. Paul is speaking about who our God is. And he says this: "Now you have approached Mount Zion, the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, with countless angels in festal gathering, the assembly of the firstborn enrolled in heaven, and God, the judge of all, and the spirits of the just men made perfect, and Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and the sprinkled blood that speaks more eloquently than that of Abel." So first, notice how he calls our God a living God. He then delves deeply into the fact that this living God is surrounded by angels, surrounded by the firstborn enrolled into heaven, meaning the saints. Then he begins to speak about how God himself, this living God, is the judge of all. But also, he speaks of this God as being a mediator of a new covenant, meaning Jesus, and that this living God has blood that is more eloquent than the blood of the Old Testament. Last evening in our confirmation class, and young Jack here is going through confirmation right now, we spoke about the Trinity, and which is beyond our comprehension, or beyond our ability to understand. But this passage, this is a passage that just resonates with my heart, and it love this passage, and we read it again and again, and for those who pray the Liturgy of the Hours. But this idea of the living God, and is always a reminder to me that God within himself is a relationship. That God within himself is a relationship. The Father loves the Son loves the Father, the Holy Spirit loves the Father, the Holy Spirit loves the Son loves the Holy Spirit, the Father loves the Holy Spirit. God within himself is a communion of persons, and God within himself is alive with love, that God is a living relationship of love. And out of that living relationship of love of who God is, God then creates the world. God then saves the world, and God then sanctifies the world. God himself is a relationship. God himself is a relationship of love. Last night in our confirmation class, we actually were speaking, our topic in the evening was specifically on the Holy Spirit, but it led us to speak specifically about the Trinity and the three persons in the Trinity and their relationship of love. And the summation of the class was the fact that God is a relationship, and we are made in the image and likeness of God, which means that we are made in relationship and for relationship. Right? And when we think about the longings of the human heart, what is the longing of every human heart? And where actually is so much of our struggle and sin caught up as a human being? In our desire for relationship. Our desire to be loved, our desire to be liked, our desire to be affirmed. And when we don't get that, or when that's not met, or that need isn't answered, we then either have to numb ourselves or plunge ourselves into depression or misery or frustration or gossip or slander. And when our relationship and this desire for relationship, which we are made for, we were made in the image and likeness of God, which means that we were made for relationship, when that is not met, the utter tragedy. We know this as adults, we see it in our own lives, and yet how much more is it all the more accelerated in the life of a young person who's just beginning to separate from their relationships with family Not that we should ever do so, but ultimately a child begins to enter into the world and enter more deeply into the world and into relationship with others. And when that bond, which was so clearly made in the earliest days of that child's life with its mother, and now it begins to look for relationship outside of mother and outside of ultimately father. And then the world the world confuses them very much so that desire for relationship can be met in so many other ways. Ultimately through the media, through pleasure, through whatever it might be. But it was really powerful last night, just going through this teaching about our living God who is three persons in one, and when you literally saw the young people make the connection to the fact that, oh, this is true, because every single one of them could rattle off the fact that they were made in the image and likeness of God. They know that. They know that they're made in the image and likeness of God. They've heard it again and again and again and again and again, and hopefully in a parish that is pro-life, every young person would know that. But when they begin to make the connection to the fact that they are made in the image and likeness of God, and that God himself is a communion of persons, and God himself is a relationship, and thus that longing that they have for relationship can only ultimately be met fully in him, and yet our relationships that we have here on earth should ultimately lead us to that relationship. It really is unbelievably profound. And so we come here today because we come before our living God at every single Mass, and we approach Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem, here at this Mass. And although we cannot see them, although we do have two statues here and two statues here, there are countless angels that are gathered here, and the firstborn, the assembly, the saints are here. And God, the judge of all, our Father, is here, and the spirits of the just made perfect are here. And Jesus, the mediator, is here, and his blood and his body are here, which we receive, and is given to all of us. How? Through the Holy Spirit. It's the only way. All of it is only received through the Holy Spirit. And thus, as we approach this morning, our living God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, who is relationship itself, he calls us today in our reception of Holy Communion, he calls us today in our worship of him to intimacy and relationship, to enter into that relationship of the Trinity. And then in our relationships here on earth, to all the more live that communion of persons and that communion of love. Today, as we hear these words, may we live them, for our God is a living God. Let us stand.